notice I'm going to sit on the floor, but a lot of the time I forget to do, and a lot of us feel a bit weird on the floor, but I'm going to embrace sitting on the floor with a cushion underneath my sits bones. Hello everyone. For those that I don't know and that are new to this group, my name is Nicola Share-Geismar, and I am the founder of Free Your Spine. Free Your Spine essentially is a method that I came up with after teaching Pilates for 13 years, and due to observing what a lot of my clients and students and people were getting into from the Pilates classes was this concept of sequential movements for the spine, release for the back, three-dimensionally, so embracing all the movements that the spine naturally and innately gives us, so forwards, back, twisting and side bending. And just developed a program around moving the spine, and then also began to prioritize looking at ways of moving and giving some release for the hips. Additionally, for the hips, also three-dimensionally, so the front of the hip, the side of the hip and the back of the hip, because these joints in our bodies, so spinal joints, hip joints, shoulder joints, they are three-dimensional joints and they like to move in all directions. So today, I do the lives every Monday where I take you through a spinal workout, I like to call them. But today I thought what I'd talk with you guys about is a bit more discussion and a bit more talking, if that's okay, about something that comes up time and time again, and more recently over the last 5 to 10 years has got a lot of attention, and that is, wait for it, the C to the O to the R to the E. That's the extent of my rapping. The infamous core. Not for me, it's gone. Phone was just ringing. So the infamous core, yeah. I think there's a lot of emphasis put on the core as being this shining temple of something that essentially will save us if we get the core right. However, do we really understand what the core is, what muscles make up your core, and techniques you can use to strengthen your core? So let's break it down, shall we? First things first, let me ask you, do you know what the core is and what muscles make up the core? Just put it in the comments box below. Be interested in knowing if you guys have any understanding or knowledge about your core already, what muscles make up your core, and if you know what the core is. And you know what, it's okay if you don't, because before that I started practicing Pilates and then went on to train to be a teacher. I didn't really have an understanding of my core whatsoever. In fact, about 2 decades ago, 20 years ago or so, when I was heavily involved in dancing, and dancing was my thing, and I would go and dance pretty much every night of the week, and I would have little to no strength conditioning practice to really address my body in a different way that would be complementary to my dance game. And it was only when I went to dance college at like 22, late developer, that I was introduced to Pilates, and from there onwards I had an intro into the core. So basically, the core is made up of a series of muscles, okay? I think if you were like me, that you think the core is that six-pack muscle, the one that looks ripped on gymnasts, athletes, dancers, anyone that goes really heavy in working the center of the body. That is part of your core, but it's the outer core. So if you think about the core being divided into layers, you've got the outer core, the middle core, and the inside part of the core, okay? And I like to compare the muscles of your core similar to the way that we look at building a house. So we want to live in a house that has a good ground floor, a good flooring structure going on. We want to live in a house that has walls to the sides of us and as we come in through the front door and to the back. And then we want to finally top that house off with a roof, okay? And then we're ready to live in that house. If that house doesn't have the walls or the roof, it's not going to be ready to live in. Same thing with your body. You want all parts of your core to be optimizing and working at their finest, so that yourself, your organs, the rest of your structure, your muscles, your ligaments, your tendons can work at their best. So let's look at the equivalent of a house: the floor, the ground, if you like, the roof, and the walls. And now let's think about that in terms of what that means for the human body. So in the human body, the floor to your house are muscles known as the pelvic floor, okay? And in simple terms, what the pelvic floor muscles do in essence are control your bladder movements. So when you need to go and do your thing in the toilet, what stops you from literally wetting yourself as you get older, you don't want to be wearing nappies anymore, are your pelvic floor muscles come in. They contract in and up to stop the flow of urine coming out and essentially having a bit of an accident before you reach the toilet. So the pelvic floor muscles are like the basement floor to your core, and they live in that pelvic girdle area, and they're really, really important for keeping not only the tonality of them, so the strength of them, but also you do want to think about them being like a trampoline, so you can contract them and then release them, especially, you know, prior to giving birth or post-birth. The ability to basically exercise your pelvic floor is super, super, super important, and anyone who's had a baby will be able to tell you that. Okay, so the pelvic floor are the ground floor of your core, okay? Then you have the walls of your core, and we can look at this as two levels. So on the deep level, remember I said we had the outer, the middle, and then inner core. So I'm talking about your inner core muscles at the moment, of which your pelvic floor are made up of. And then your, let's say your next layer is your transversus abdominis, they're known as, or your TA in short, transversus abdominis. And what that muscle is like, I like to think of it as a back belt that wraps around from the base of the ribs at the back, around your waist, and draws in towards the navel and down towards the pelvic area, towards your pubic bone area. So for ladies, if you think about a corset, it's like a corset sheath of muscle that comes around from the back into the waist, into the front. For gents, it's like a waistcoat that wraps around from the back to the waist to the front. And so this band of muscle is a very important core stabilizing muscle, okay? It's a very, very fundamental muscle that is very key to a lot of the movements that you do if you practice Pilates, but also if that muscle isn't being exercised, and there's different ways you can strengthen it, and I'll talk about that a bit more next week, then you are going to be a bit more susceptible to lower back ache, lower back injuries, tightnesses, tensions, and so on and so forth. The important thing to remember is these muscles that I'm going through work in conjunction with one another, okay? So the pelvic floor and contraction lifts up and in towards this band of corset, aka transversus abdominis muscles, okay? So that's your second important muscle that makes up the CORE, the core. The third muscle, let me just make sure I'm not leaving anything out. Yeah, so the third muscle is very, very magical, and it's your diaphragm, okay? Your diaphragm is your prime respiratory muscle, so it controls the flow of your breath, and it lives at the base of the rib cage. And essentially the diaphragm, that's why breathing with the movements that you do, in specifically when it comes to specific core engagement movements or central stabilizing movements to strengthen the pelvic floor, to strengthen the transversus abdominis, it's super important to get your breath involved so that diaphragm begins to mobilize and strengthen and work alongside the other key core muscles. The diaphragm lives like a magic mushroom, I was going to say, a bit bigger than a magic mushroom. In fact, it's probably not that much bigger because our bodies, are not like giants, but it's like a parachute that fans underneath the base of the rib cage. Okay, and when that gets stagnant, it gets lazy, it's not being exercised, it can affect not only all the connections into the ribs and the flow of breath, because the lungs live very in close proximity to the diaphragm, the lungs are in the ribs. It affects the flow of how things basically circuit around the body, as well as your capacity to tap into strengthening your core stabilizing muscles. And these core muscles act as stabilizers, okay? So they act as a way to stabilize your spinal column, essentially your lower spine especially. So you have your pelvic floor, you have your transversus abdominis, and then you have your key breathing muscle known as the diaphragm. And then the final core muscle, and you'll read lots of different research about what comprises the core. Some people put the obliques in, which is another layer of your abdominal muscles that layer on top of the transverses, that are your waist abdominals, the ones that help you rotate from side to side. But yeah, I'm just keeping it to the 4 fundamental muscles that come up time and time again for today. So the last and final muscle group I'm going to tell you about is known as the multifidi. And these ones are little sneaky, deep seated spinal muscles. So actually live, turn around, in your lower spine, but on the deep level, okay, in your lower back. And yeah, these ones often get forgotten about, and this is why when we think of core, we might think about the core being slap bang in the front of the body, but actually if you think about your core being a 3-dimensional unit, that's what it is, because we have the multifidi that live deep in the back, and if you cough, you can feel these muscles. If you put your hands into the small of the back and then you cough, you'll feel the multifidi. If you cough, or sometimes you laugh, you might feel them, but you'll also feel, if you cough or laugh, and give this a go now or later on, you'll feel the transverses you can feel them more so by bringing your hands into the inner hips and coughing, and then you'll feel those muscles kind of jump out at you, yeah, and those are your deep core muscles. So that's a way to also get a little friendly with them. So it's useful to think of your 6-pack muscles as being like the kind of the shop window, and then your pelvic floor, your transversus abdominis, your diaphragm, and your multifidi being the clothes in the store. When you go in through the door of that shop, you have all your skirts, your jumpers, your shoes, your belts, your bags, and all that, the content in there, in the shop, is your core, basically. So it's not useful for the body to just work the outer layer, like the rectus abdominis, they're known as. Often when you see people going ham in the gym, doing all the sit-ups that they can do on a Wednesday evening, what they're working is the rectus, is that 6-pack muscle, the ones that dent down at the front of the body. That's great from an aesthetical point of view, from aesthetics, brilliant to have strong 6-pack. From a functional, preventative, healthy body perspective, you want to have strong look going on the window front in your six pack, but you want to have a strong shop inside, right? You want to have a strong inner core. And there's lots of different ways you can strengthen your inner core. And in a lot of respects, the reason why we slip a disc, we get herniated discs, we get pain in our back, we might get referred pain elsewhere, is because we have neglected doing that inner core strengthening work. And this is where spinal mobility, moving the spine can really help back pain and issues of the spine, but also doing that deep strengthening work. And one way you can do it really simply, I'll give you one strategy today, just because I'm aware of your time, is you can actually strengthen that inner core unit from using your breath, which is pretty goddamn superb. You don't even need to do crazy amount of sit-ups. You can strengthen that deep core by using your breath. Okay, and I'm going to take you through how you can do that now. So if we just all bring our hands onto our abdomen, I'm going to call this one the abdominal breathing, okay? So you're going to think about, on your inhale, just swelling your abdomen into your hands like it's a big balloon, breathing into your hands as you inhale. And you're then going to breathe out through the mouth. And as you do, what you're going to think about doing is lifting up your floor, so your pelvic floor muscles, squeezing them up and in. You're going to think about your waistline narrowing into the belly button and drawing the abdomen in and back to your spine. So you get that sense of sucking up through the pelvic floor, that three-dimensional connection from the back into the waist into the front. Does that make sense? Sounds quite a lot to do all on one exhale, but the more you do it, the more you'll start to educate these muscles to switch on, and then just let them go. Yeah, so it's important to connect and engage these muscles, but also you don't want them to become hypertonic, which is when they become too tight. You want to also educate them in the ability to just let loose and chill out. So again, we're going to breathe into the abdomen, take a big breath in there. And then as you exhale, engage, lift the PF muscles in and up like you're stopping yourself from doing a wee, and then draw in through the waistline and from the back. And it's a light engagement, so we're not going crazy, super hard, yeah? It's like, think about 30% of a tight fist. So you're not going like this, like too much, you're going about there, okay? So try that out, guys. Give that a go, like every day. Try and do like five to 8 reps of that swelling of the abdomen, of the tummy, breathing in. And then on your exhale, connect, engage through the pelvic floor, through the waistline, narrowing the waistline, drawing the abdomen into the back. And it might be helpful to do this one lying down on the back when you practice that. So there we have it, the C to the O to the R to the E. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, if that all made sense. Hopefully it did. And I will see you on Monday for a live spinal move and groove. Please do join me, 1 p.m. Live from the comfort of your own space and from me in London town. This is Nicola. Have a great rest of your day. Ciao.